thank you for joining us today. We've got a great show for you, but first I do want to share some demographic trends with you that I thought would be very interesting. And this is related to something called shadow demand. Now, during the Great Recession, which now is 15 years ago, really 16 years ago, even 17 years ago, depending on how you look at it, right, when it really started. But we heard a lot about shadow supply, the supply of properties that will eventually hit the market, but aren't hitting the market yet because the lenders hadn't done their foreclosures and they hadn't put the properties on the market and so on and so forth. So that is what was called shadow supply. I want to talk to you about the other side of the equation today, and that is shadow demand. And we have discussed this before, but I really did some work on this last week, and I looked at some real hardcore, firm, undisputable, unassailable demographic data that I think will be very interesting to you. So when we look at shadow demand, this is the one component of the number of people that need to form a household. The people that haven't formed a household yet, meaning they didn't demand a rental property or they didn't demand a for sale property that they needed to buy because they have not yet formed a household. Now, the typical household in the United States includes 1.8 people, 1.8 people, right? Some have 3 people, some have 1 person, some have 2.2, whatever it is, but 1.8. That's the typical number. So I did a little math here for you, and I looked at this. Now, you've all seen, and if you're watching on video, you see on the screen the demographic pyramid or the population pyramid. I've shown these to you many times over the years because the US, out of all developed countries, has a really healthy demographic pyramid, as opposed to China, Japan, Russia, Western Europe, et cetera, have very unhealthy demographic pyramids, meaning they have a severe demographic crisis that they are already experiencing that will only get dramatically worse as we approach next year, the year after that, and certainly the next decade. So the US in a very good position compared to these other countries. All right, so this is our demographic pyramid, and this is how it looks overall. But let's zoom in on this nice, fat demographic pyramid. This is exactly what we want. This is a good demographic pyramid because it shows that there are a lot of young people coming up, forming households, and supporting the older people who are retiring. This is what we want to see for a healthy population pyramid. Now, it won't always be this way, by the way, because if you look at the bottom of this demographic pyramid for the really, really young people, there aren't enough of them being born. So this ultimately, fast forward a few decades, this is going to become a problem. And we've talked about that before too, but you really don't have to worry about this until the mid 2040s or maybe even the late 2040s. And it's subject, of course, to immigration and various factors that are complex. And we'll talk about those in 2035. How's that? Set your calendar for episode number 19,336. We'll talk about those in 2035. I'm not sure how the math works out on that, by the way. But, we do 156 episodes per year, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Do the math. Get back to me. Comment below if you did the math for what episode number we'll be on in, 2035, right? Okay, so let's zoom in on this demographic pyramid, though. This is the important thing. We want to zoom in on a certain age group, and this is the people who, some of them are a little young to consider, but because of this one statistic I was able to get a hold of, this is what we're talking about today. And these are 18 to 29-year-olds, and there are a lot of these people. There are a lot of these people adding to our very healthy demographic pyramid in the United States. So let's take a look at that. This is this big part of the pyramid, right? And we see this is kind of an upside down version of it, right? Resident population of the United States by sex and age as of July of 2022. Okay, so as we look at this chart and we look at this demographic cohort, we see this is a pretty big group of people. And we are looking at what? Over 40 million of these people that are part of the shadow demand equation. So let's zoom in on this a little bit. And here we've got 45 million people in this demographic cohort. Now, this is the startling and amazing thing. Do you know that half of these people are living at home with their parents? Yes, folks, this is a new era, right? It didn't used to be this way. In my Gen X generation, a little older than this group, no way you would be living with your parents, right? If you were a baby boomer, no way you'd be living with your parents at this age, right? I mean, maybe when you're 18 you would. Usually when you're 18, maybe you'd go off to college. But nowadays we have the boomerang, I don't even want to say generation because it's really two generations now. It's the millennials and the Zoomers, the genZers, right? So two generations of people who are living with their parents much, much longer. But in this particular cohort we're talking about today, it's 45 million people and half of them are living at home with their parents. So we've got 22,500,000 people. Almost 23 million people. Folks, if your mouth is not watering yet, if you are a real estate investor, it should be. You should be very, very excited about this. Check it out. 1.8 adults per household. That's the number. So we simply take our 22,500,000 people and we take 1.8 as the average household size, and that leaves us with 12,500,000 actual housing units needed. Okay, it's a big country. There's a lot of houses. In fact, there's almost 140 million housing units in the United States. That's true. But wait, look at how many are for sale currently. Only 499,000 are for sale. Now, this takes a few years to play out, of course. We all understand that. These 12.5 million people aren't going to suddenly form a household tomorrow. It may take 3 years, 5 years. It might take the next 10 years. But we know it's coming. That we can be sure of. We know the household formation and the demand is coming. We know it's coming. And we know that the supply will not be relinquished, meaning people dying off soon enough to satisfy this demand. And that's another equation, right? The supply side, right? But we know that there are currently 499,000 housing units for sale. About 0.3% of all of the housing inventory in the United States. Again, we're in a very inventory constricted market. And so what do we have here? We have normal inventory of about 1.2 million homes. We have urgently low inventory now of over 499,000 homes for sale. And how does that compare? Because the right question is always, compared to what? Well, inventory is down by 10.3% year over year. So last year at this time, we had 10.3% more inventory. And if you look at the pre-pandemic era, 2019 at this time, inventory is down by 49.3%. We literally have half of the inventory we had pre-pandemic. And we have a shortage of 700,000 homes below normal. And the shadow demand is 12.5 million. You do the math. This is the kind of stuff demographers and economists look at to understand the future need for housing and the future demand. So there you go. I hope that's helpful. Having a big shadow demand in a low supply world equals rising rents and rising prices. It just can't do anything else. And then people will say, well, housing affordability is so much lower than it used to be. And to that I say, you're right. But so what? Housing affordability is better in the United States than it is in a whole bunch of places around the world. It's certainly better than it is in the UK. It's better than it is in Hong Kong. It's better than it is in a lot of places. There are a lot of places around the world where the compared to what question would tell you that homes in the United States are actually quite affordable. So just because of this comparison to how it used to be here, right? How it used to be here a few years ago. Yes, housing affordability was dramatically better, but that doesn't mean it can't get a lot worse. That's the thing people have to understand. The compared to what? You've got to compare it to the right thing, right? And just because something was one way a few years ago doesn't mean it has to go back to that way. I mean, nothing really goes back to the way it was, does it? Look at all of the things in life that just will never, ever return. I know people love to be nostalgic. I do too, about the old days and about the way things used to be, but that's just not the way the world works. Okay, so I hope that's helpful to you. If you want to learn more about these issues and many more things, join us on our Empowered Investor Cruise. We're going to have last call for this real soon, folks, because we've got to make another deposit to Celebrity Cruises for all of these rooms. And it is really important that you book your ticket now if you want to go. Go to empoweredinvestorlive.com, empoweredinvestorlive.com. Hang out with us on the beautiful, brand new Celebrity Apex. I believe this is the most stunning cruise ship in the world, actually, because I went on the sister ship several months ago in Europe, and it was phenomenal. The Celebrity Edge. This is the Apex. This is the brand new sister ship of that. And it's just going to be a phenomenal time. We've got 2 days of education at sea, 3 days in port, networking, learning, having fun, having a great time. So join us for our Empowered Investor Cruise. Go to empoweredinvestorlive.com and get your tickets today. We're going to have last call for that real soon.